Welcome back to this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the double entry accounting system, and that's going to involve debits and credits. So as you read through the chapter, you're going to be learning how the different accounts are impacted in a transaction and how if you're increasing an asset account, you're always going to be debiting that account. And if you decrease an asset account, you're going to be crediting that account. Conversely, on a liability, if you increase a liability, you're going to credit it, and if you decrease a liability, you're going to debit it. In every transaction that you do, your debits have to equal your credits. So let's think about this. We're going to buy a truck, an asset, and we're going to buy it on account. That's an accounts payable, a liability. So the asset, the truck account, is debited for, let's say, $10,000. And the liability, accounts payable, let's call it, is credited for $10,000. In each case, we've increased the asset account and we've increased the liability. We now pay off that transaction. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay off our accounts payable with cash. So we're going to decrease cash, which is a credit. We're also going to pay off that liability, and so we're going to debit the account. And as you can see, your debits equal your credits. Now follow this chart. It's in your visuals for session 3, and review what the increases of an account are and what are the decreases. We're now going to move on to our sample problem when we start to apply some of these rules. Now let's proceed to our session 3 sample problem. One of the things that I try to do in each module and for each chapter is to provide you with a sample problem. And here's our sample problem for session 3, chapter 3. And just as you would imagine, we're going to be handling transactions, and so you're going to start to think of those rules that we were just talking about, how you handle the debits and the credits. And then below that, you're going to see what we're going to be dealing with is something that I call a T account, even though they tend to be called general ledger accounts. But you're going to record the transactions in this sort of T account format, and you'll have to do this with your homework manager problem as well. And so I'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes. But you'll be handling this to determine the balance of each of your accounts. And you can see in our sample problem there are a number of various transactions involving your cash account. By dealing with the debits on the left side, debits are always on the left side of our T account here, credits are always on the right side, you can see where we can determine a balance of our accounts. In this case, we have $5,000 transaction entry, a $650 transaction entry, and we have a $1,300 transaction debit. All those are increasing your cash account. Then on the right side of your T account, you see all the decreases. We add up our increases, we subtract out our decreases, and that gives us our account balance, in this case, of $3,900. Now, part 3 of our problem, and part 3 of our sample problem and homework manager problem, is going to ask you to develop a trial balance. And as you can see right here, here's the balance that we determined in our general ledger T account of $3,900, and we slide down and we record that in our trial balance, the account balance. And so we do that for each of the accounts that we've had transactions for. We show all of our trial balance accounts, and you'll never guess, but because every transaction the debits have to equal the credits, you're going to find that the debit balances of all of our accounts are going to equal the credit balances of all of our accounts. Now we're going to slide back up here and we're going to just do one transaction just to help you out and remind you how we're going to be dealing with things. Transaction A, Leinert invested $5,000 in a new checking account in the name of his business, the Dancing Quarterback. So now we have to think about how are we going to deal with this. By putting $5,000 into a new checking account, that's considered your cash account. So right off the bat, you know you're going to be debiting that asset account of cash by $5,000. So we slide down here And right here you can see our debit to cash of $5,000 in transaction A. Normally, instead of saying transaction A, you'd actually have the date of this transaction in here. And then you would have the credit to balance that transaction. Remember, your debits have to equal your credits. We're investing it in the business, so that's going into our capital account. So we have Leinert Capital. To increase our capital account, we have to credit it. Credits appear on the right. And so you now have your balanced transaction. You have a debit to cash of $5,000 and a credit to Leinert Capital of $5,000. Now let's proceed over to our actual homework manager problem and see what you're going to be asked to do. Here we are in our homework manager assignment. And you're going to see there are 3 questions involved in this, and you're only going to be asked to handle 2 of these questions. The first question, very similar to our sample problem, where you're asked to do handling transactions. You'll never guess, but here's transaction 1 on March 1st. Brooks invested $170,000 cash along with $21,000 of office equipment into the business. So what you're going to be asked to do is you're going to be asked to then make up your T accounts, and right off the bat you can see that your various accounts are going to involve cash, which is always a classic that you like, and you're also going to see something like office equipment. So the first requirement asks you to handle these transactions. Now the book is very nice in that it gives you the various types of accounts that you can deal with, and you can see here's cash right off the bat, and you know that that's one of the accounts you're going to be dealing with. And you go back up here and it says $170,000, and whatever you would do, you would then just debit that for $170,000, and you would just type that figure in. You do not do dollar signs, and then you would proceed to identify your other accounts. Now I'm going to go down to requirement 2 down here. We're going to slide down. You'll have to handle all the transactions on your own. But then when we get down to the requirements down here, you see what they do. They say offline. So you do not submit this in the homework manager section, but you're going to be opening up what they call the general ledger accounts. And the account numbers are very important because you do your entries with the lowest account number first. So in our case, remember how we talked about cash? Cash is a 101 account, so that tends to be your first account. Now all of your asset accounts tend to be, in this problem, 100s. All of your liability accounts tend to be 200s. And so you'll see accounts payable down here is account number 201. The capital accounts tend to be 300s, and you have 2 of those. You have the D. Brooks Capital and you have D. Brooks Withdrawal. And then you have the various revenue accounts is 400, and the expense accounts are 600. And so you start to see the various accounts that you're going to be dealing with. So what you're going to do is you always do your debit entries first. They're pretty good in the problem as they set it up so that you do your debit entries first, and you see how they're pretty good and that they indicate here that you're going to be 2 debits on 1 transaction and 1 credit. So that tends to be the way that you start to look at something. So this is our hint on the handling the transactions part. And then requirement 3 actually asks you to develop a trial balance. So you might want to go back to the book and the materials and refer to how you do that. But remember, you're going to set your trial balance up in account number order. So as you would imagine, your first account's going to be cash because that's the lowest number that you're going to have for an asset account, cash being 101. So that's the first one. These are my hints for the Chapter 3, Session 3 workshop. I hope they help. And be sure, if you have any questions, send me a message through our private messaging system within the course site. So see you later in the course. Hope you enjoyed our video lesson. Bye-bye.